Hey folks, it's Glaive here with a update from a recent dev Q&A that's been hosted on the official New World Discord. Questions answered include the price of materials such as chromatic seals and dark matter, the scarcity of dark matter, artifact loot drops, open world PvP, recent patch sizes, and many more. There's quite a lot to get through, so let's get started. The first question is probably one of the most pertinent questions. They were asked whether the devs are happy with the current state of dark matter in the game, how much is required for crafting, and the quantities and sources of that dark matter. Thankfully, the devs seem to have noticed there is a little bit of disparity, so for the more hardcore player who are running sandworm trials regularly, who are on PvP reward track 200, are getting a really healthy amount of dark matter, and that seems to be where they want it for those players. For the rest of us, they have noticed that perhaps more can be done. So for casual PvP modes like Outpost Rush, for example, they have identified that there is room for more dark matter, and coming with Season 4, they are planning to, I quote, adjust a few of these faucets to work towards making casual players have enough to upgrade items at a consistent enough cadence. Next up is a question around loot luck, particularly pertaining to artifacts. Now, the player in question has gone from level 12 to level 50 on the PvP track and still hasn't had the slightest whiff of the Serenity Greatsword. The devs recognise the frustration when you're grinding for these kind of things. Obviously, the artifacts are game-changing within the game. They come with unique perks, unique stats, so it can be a point of anger for some people. They are looking at this, they've experienced it themselves. For PvP reward track artifacts, there are some changes in the pipeline in terms of the frequency at which certain track pipes might be able to reveal those artifacts. They're going to talk more with us about this later, and they expect us to hear more information on bad luck protection for artifacts in Season 4. Next, the devs were asked if there are any plans to adjust the loot tables for PvE trials. Sadly, there are no plans right now. They've said the expansion brought forward a lot of legacy content into continued relevance while adding new content that expanded the rewards chase around the game. I personally think this is a little bit of an L. It's quite sad. New World is still a relatively new game, and as a result, there is still a bit of a dearth of endgame content. That is to say, there could be more to do once you reach endgame. I do think that by bringing the trials up to endgame, that would be a bit of a W for the game and fill that gap to some extent. However, who knows? Things may change in the future, but for now, there are no plans to make trials any more endgame relevant than they currently are. They were next asked whether there'll be a way in-game to tell which items are upgradable. Now, I don't think this is a bad idea. Obviously, we have the named items, which can now be upgraded at a gypsum kiln to 700. Who's to say there won't be more items in the future? Having some kind of tooltip, it's not going to hurt, is it? It all lends itself to the user experience. The response was that, generally speaking, if an item is named and it's above gear score 625, then you should be able to upgrade the item to gear score 700 and re-roll a perk. There are, of course, some bugs with this. As we know, there are instances in the PvP reward track where named items aren't currently able to be upgraded, but they are treating these as bugs and they're aiming to rectify these soon and as they see them. The next question is one that's very close to my heart, and that was whether or not they had any plans to do anything to improve global storage. They like the concept of global storage, but they also think that with the amount of items that we have in game, that a tabbed storage system is probably the way to go, and I would be inclined to agree. What I would say from a purely organizational obsessive perspective is that being able to rename those tabs would be very helpful. For example, one tab for crafting materials, one tab for named items, and so on and so forth. One thing that isn't mentioned here, which I would have asked, is whether or not there are any plans to allow crafting stations, trading posts, and gypsum kilns to pull from global storage. Currently, you can only pull from the tab of the town that you are in. If we could come to some sort of system where these stations pull from the entire storage system, then I think, personally, our storage problems would be solved. Also asked was whether there are any plans on adding more furniture, and the response was that we're always adding more furniture to the game. With Rise of the Angry Earth, we just added a number of fun new recipes like the statues, and we're looking at furnishing additions into the future. Now, some have said that Rise of the Angry Earth was a little bit lackluster when it comes to furniture. There were no trophies, there were no chests. Not really my bag, so I can't comment too much, but it's nice to see that it's on the radar. Debated asked if there are any plans to up the XP gains and gold earned in Outpost Rush. Now, I've been playing Outpost Rush as a bit of a newbie, and I must say, especially given how long the matches can be, it doesn't always feel very rewarding. They have come back and said that they have some changes to PvP XP in Outpost Rush coming in Season 4 that will make the mode more rewarding and help you progress quicker. Now, outside of that, they seem to be happy with where Outpost Rush is at, but do look for those changes in Season 4. In general, Season 4 does seem to have quite a few changes coming with it. Next up, we have a couple of questions around chromatic seals. The first one is, can we get a final answer on this? In the patch notes, it was stated that named items could be upgraded with 1 chromatic seal, but in the live game it's 3. They've said before, and they've confirmed here again, that 3 chromatic seals is intended. It's where they want it. They looked at the stats in the PTR, felt it was a little bit too easy, and so increased the requirements, so 3 it is. It was also asked whether they would be open to allowing players to craft multiple chromatic seals in a single day, 2 or 3 for example. The time gate can feel a little bit punishing, however they've got no plans to change this at this time. They're evaluating the sources of chromatic seals, however, for future content, maybe in the Season of Giving, so we might see some additional sources for the seals coming our way. On another note, pun intended, they were asked about new music sheets and new instruments. The response was that Medley Fair, returning next year, may well have some more music sheets in it, which might even bring us to the full soundtrack of the game. There are no plans for new instruments at this time though, but they are curious to see what instruments people would like to see. My vote? Bagpipes. We have another question around chromatic seals and whether or not they would consider making them bind on equip instead of bind on pickup. Now the wording's a bit funky here, but it's clear what's meant by this. Would they consider making it so that you can purchase your chromatic seals, sell them to another player? The response was there are no plans to make chromatic seals bind on equip right now. They're happy with their BOP status. It levels out the playing field between the time rich and more casual players so that the time rich can't buy a bunch of seals and zoom past others. I do wonder whether they were keeping this in mind when it came to umbral shards. Obviously, a lot of people were made in-game wealthy by the sale of umbral shards during the release of Rise of the Angry Earth. I did suggest selling them for gold on a basis of diminishing returns, but here we are. Next up, the question of whether or not farming would be allowed on our properties was brought up, kind of like, I guess, Arcade or Black Desert Online, and they've said that there are no plans for farming at the moment. They like the idea and agree that it's a cool way to extend the housing system and would tie well into many of the crafting and economy loops, but it is a pretty big chunk of work, and it is. And there are no plans for them to tackle it soon. It would tie in very well, but it would also throw the economy into, I would imagine, freefall. It's a very, very cool mechanic. I've played it myself, as I say, in Black Desert and in Arcade. Whether or not it would fit in this game, I'm not entirely sure. Next is a big question, and that's around the future of gypsum casts. Now, as you know, gypsum casts were, for the most part, there to help you get your expertise level up in the old game. They were also a very good source of umbral shards. Currently, they're taking a look at gypsum casts. They don't anticipate any changes in Season 4, but they do understand the sentiment that they're in a weird spot right now. Now, weird is selling it short, I think. Currently, gypsum casts just pad out the gypsum kiln menu. They could be a very, very, very good source for dark matter. They could even raise the gear score of gypsum casts to make them more relevant in the new game. But I guess we'll see. It's something they're looking at and time will tell. The next question was around any plans to help reduce the file download sizes. We've had quite a few patches and hotfixes since the release of Rise of the Angry Earth, and they have been chunky boys, to say the least. Now, they've come back and said it's a fair question because of the way that Steam reads these files and because of the nature of some of the changes and the bugs and the fixes that they've made. Even a small change can impact a lot of systems in-game, which in turn increases the size of the download that we're having to make. Now, all of that said, they have said that they're working on some engine optimizations to help minimize patch deltas Smaller optimizations are already in place, and there's more in the pipeline. We keep hearing about engine optimization, and I'll be honest, I think this is going to be a big topic for 2024. Clearly, they've got to the point where they know their engine's limitations, they're looking at what they can do to improve this, and this is actually going to be really important work if they're going to continue to increase the size and the scope of the game, which of course is what's going to happen with every future expansion. Stay tuned. Mythwing asks whether there are any plans to create a custom war mode within the game. Their focus right now is on making all of the existing modes cross-world. They do say that Outpost Rush provides some amount of practice for those groups that are perhaps less organised or less practiced at open world PvP. Obviously, there is still a gap there between the more casual player base and the more hardcore player base, so it's something they'd like to provide an outlet for in the future. Next, a returning player asks why there is so much self-heal in the game all of a sudden, stating that it feels unfun to play against and seems to be overpowered. Now, this has been brought up a lot in the community recently, and the response is that a lot of the self-healing was already in the game, but the increase in gear score, the increase in level score in Rise of the Angry Earth, it's pushed values a little bit higher than intended. In addition, shirking heals, which is a known issue amongst the player base, is healing for a hell of a lot more than was also intended, and they're going to be fixing that in the next update. Stay tuned for more. They say there are further healing updates coming with Season 4. Jake L asks whether there'll be a limit in future to how many territories a single company can own, and the response is that as of right now, they've got no plans to hard limit this. They are interested in trying a few more things to try and make it more difficult to own multiple territories for long periods of time, but they don't have any plans to share with us right now. The next question is open world PvP related again. It asks whether there are any plans to make race events instants to improve performance or allow more players to participate without being teleported out. Now, as anyone with a mid-range PC will attest, performance is paramount. And if you do go into a packed area, it is going to take a hit. They have recognized this, and the response is that they're not looking at instanced, but they are going to be changing the schedule slightly in a couple of weeks so that 4 territories per day will have races, and of those 4, 2 will fire at once instead of 1. Now, based on the popularity of the races, they believe that spreading out over 2 zones instead of the 1 will still have great player density, but it will lower the density in any one place enough that it should see better performance, and hopefully those mid-range PCs won't take as much of a hit. Teleporting is always going to be a thing as far as they're concerned, as it's an important function to keep any one faction from overwhelming the area with raw numbers, but this change in zoning and what races are going on at what time should reduce teleporting somewhat and help improve the frame rate. Clear Menace asks whether there are any plans to address the massive amount of tents spawning open world for influence races. Now, as much as I'm a fan of the Glastonbury Festival vibe, they have said, we have been watching this and we'll very likely make some tweaks here. We intend to adjust the respawn cooldown on camps when you die a PvP death, but they're also considering other changes to PvP respawn rules. Whatever they do, they would like it to be consistent across all open world PvP, not just for the race zones, so I guess stay tuned for more information. The aptly named Long Distance would like to know if they could make it so that horse races are replayable even once you've done them, even once you've completed them. Personally, I think if I was to redo that content, there would need to be more to it than there currently is. For example, actual structured races against other players, that might be fun, but each to their own. What they've said is that they're glad that Long Distance and others have enjoyed the riding questline, and they feel the same about them. They've got some ideas about what they can do to add more content there. There's nothing concrete to share right now, but again, we'll hear more when there's more to talk about. And finally, they were asked whether there's been any consideration to increasing the access to already played cinematics. For example, can we go back and watch season stories? Now, they've said that it is possible to rewatch cinematics that are part of the main story quests if you go back to where those items are located in the world. Sadly, currently, as we know, that's not true for season cinematics, as some of those quests are only available for a limited time, and they have no plans on changing that. It would be nice Although they've said then they've got no plans for it, it would be nice to see a journal or a location where we could go back and rewatch that stuff, especially as a content creator. It would be very nice to be able to access it, but currently no plans to change things. And that's it. That's the video. I'm going to go and make myself some breakfast. It's Sunday morning and I'm starving. Meanwhile, I hope you found some value in this. I hope you found it informative or enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Help me feed the algorithm. It would also be great to hear your comments. You can leave your comments below, or alternatively, hop into Twitch. I stream on Mondays, Wednesdays and Friday evenings, UK time. It'd be great to chat and get your thoughts. Meanwhile, I'll see you next time. Take care.